Hari Om. Vakratunda Mahakaya Suryakoti Samaprabha Nirvignam Kurume Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Namaste friends. Welcome to session 133 of Bhagavad Gita verse by verse. We will continue our study of chapter 18 known as Moksha Sannyasa Yoga. Today, we are taking up verses 11 to 15 of this chapter for our study. Later, Srimati Smita is going to chant the verses that were discussed in the class. Before all that, Dr. Sanjay Mehrotra will give us a quick recap of the verses we studied in our last episode. Over to you, Dr. Sanjay, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Venkatesh. I'm going to do the recap of the previous session. This is session 133. The previous session was 132. The recap is for the verses from 6 to 10. As we know, the 18th chapter begins with a question from Arjuna, where he is asking Krishna that what is renunciation, or we also call it sannyasa. Most of us understand this expression like a lifestyle of a monastic or a monk who goes into the ashrama sannyasa. And of course, this involves study of scriptures and also spread of the spiritual teaching across various parts of the world and country. But before becoming a sannyasi, a purified mind is required, without which there can be disastrous consequences of such a lifestyle. And the most important aspect of this qualification is to give up raga and dvesha. And I think that is the most important aspect of our control of mind, giving up attachment and aversion. Next slide, please, sir. In the fourth verse, Krishna gives his verdict about renunciation, which is described in three parts or three-fourths. But before giving the details of renunciation, in the fifth verse, Krishna talked about the process and possession of a purified mind, which requires yajna, danam, and tapas. It's called as yajno, danam, tapaschaiva. And these are the three purifiers for mind. For whom? Manishina. For that intelligent human being, who this gives human being the jnana yogyata prapti. So when you do yajna, danam, and tapas, you get yogyata prapti to become a jnani. And Shankaracharya adds to this that after you have reached the state, you can leave all these three, and as he has described in his understanding of the Advaita Vedanta. Next slide, please. So the sixth verse says, Etani apitu karmani sangam tyakta falani cha kartavyani itime partha nishchitam matam uttamam. He says, renouncing the attachment and the results, these actions alone are to be performed, and this I consider the best teaching. What are the actions? That you should do yajna, danam, and tapas. These are the three important parts, which are the three important disciplines before you become even thinking of sannyasa. Next slide, please. In the seventh verse, which is niyastasya tu sannyasah karmana na upapadyate mohat tasya parityaga tamasah parikirtitah, which means that you cannot renunciate the obligatory action which are required for the human beings, which are required for nara. Its renunciation out of delusion is said to be tamasic. So now he is describing, next slide please, sir, that remember Arjuna, not to renounce the spiritual discipline which is yajna, danam, and tapa. So somebody wants to run away from them and goes to sannyasa directly without understanding what is yajna, what is danam, and what is tapa. They are called as niyataha karmas. Without this, sannyasa is not proper. Some people renounce those karmas due to ignorance of not understanding the values of this. And once they do it, this is brought about by tamas. The tamas in them makes them not understand the value, and Krishna calls it tamasa sannyasa. They have to leave the moha, which is called mohat parityaga. Krishna also says that karma is very important for spiritual growth. Here, the definition of sattvic karma, rajasic karma, and tamasic karma is important to understand. And in the following few verses, you will probably understand it. Next slide, please. An unprepared mind which goes to sannyasa by renouncing these sattvic karmas, he contaminates his mind, and he can also contaminate the whole aspect or the institution of sannyasa ashram. This is also called as tamasa sannyasa. Mohat, which means ajnanam, they go to sannyasa, and this was the case for Arjuna, who wanted to take the sannyasa arc, which is the first chapter he talks about. But why should I fight this war? Let me go to sannyasa. Leave this. I don't want to kill my people. In the 8th verse, Krishna describes another reason for renunciation of sattvic karma by an unprepared mind. Dukhumattevi yat karma kaya klesh bhayat tyajet saha kratva rajasam tyagam na eva tyaga phalam labhe. Out of fear of physical strain, one gives up the duty, which is to do these karmas, considering it to be a troublesome. This is called as a rajasic renunciation. He will never get the results of the renunciation. Next slide, please. In the second type of person, who's unprepared student or who needs to perform sattvic karma, but renounces it not because of ignorance, but due to their attachment to the body and its comfort. That means his desires. So he doesn't leave his desires, and then he renounces the sattvic karma. Krishna says that is kaya klesh bhayat tyajet. Because of discomfort and attachment to the body, he renounces the sattvic karma, and this is called as rajasa sannyasa. Saha naha eva labhe. He never gets the tyag phalam, the results of renunciation. Next slide, please. In the 9th verse, karyam iti eva yat karma niyatam kriyate Arjuna sangam tyaktva phalam cha eva saha tyagah sattvika mata. Renouncing attachment and the result. Suppose the obligatory action is performed with the attitude that it should be done. He is committed to that. This renunciation is considered sattvika, O Arjuna. Next slide. So Krishna defines here the sattvic sannyasa as performing that karma without being concerned about the material benefits. Of course, we have known about what that's Karma Yoga, which he calls niyata karma, and he has renounced the results of such action also. And he considered this as an obligatory action. Without that, if you become a sannyasi, you are actually going to harm the institution of sannyasa, because you cannot sustain to remain in the requirement of that ashrama or that existence. Such a renunciate is considered to be a sattvika sannyasa. Thus, Krishna has described all the 3 types of sannyasa. And going to the 10th verse, next slide, please. Na dveshti akushalam karma kushale na anushajjate tyagi sattva samavishta medhavi chinna sanshaya. So Krishna says that established in sattva, a renouncer becomes wise, free from all doubts. He does not hate a disagreeable work, nor he is attached to an agreeable one. Next slide, please, sir. From this verse onwards, Krishna talks about the glory of Karma Yoga, that which is what we call as sattvic sannyasa. A sattvic sannyasi, yogi, akushalam karma na dveshti. He does not hate any duty that comes in his way. He never complains. This is important. We have seen a lot of people doing, but they're cribbing or whining or worrying or talking about it, which is not a kushalam karma, it is akushalam karma. He does not hate unpleasant duties. Kushale na anushajjate. When there are pleasant duties, he is not attached to them also. This is a sattvika sannyasi. What will happen to him? Over a period of time, he becomes a medhavi or wise. Intellect goes further up. Next slide, please. Karma Yoga gives yogyata to become a jnani, and once jnana is acquired, gives a possibility of liberation. Karma Yoga directly does not give liberation, although there may be controversy about it. Certain people think even Karma Yoga can be given, but according to the Advaita Vedanta and Shankaracharya's Bhashyam, Karma Yoga cannot give you liberation. You have to be a jnani. Further, through the 12th verse, Krishna will teach Arjuna inability of a person who is attached with his body to become a renouncer, and also that who is attached to the results of action, what will he become after death? Hari Om sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjay, for giving us an excellent recap of the verses that we studied in the last class of the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om. We continue our study of the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, which, as we know, is the biggest chapter, Moksha Sannyasa Yoga. The style followed of our tradition is give an introduction that is called Upakrama Sankshepa, and then it's elaborated from the 3rd chapter up to the 17th chapter, and then we have a Upasamhara Sankshepa once again. As we saw again, this large 78 verse chapter can be divided into 2 halves, or maybe even 3. The first half is about various sadhanas. So Krishna will go on repeating Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga alternatively. Even in today's class, you will see the first part will be Karma Yoga. The second half of the class will be touching on Jnana Yoga. In the second half, he will touch on the second half. This half also includes various topics, which is a continuation of the 17th chapter. And each of these topics will be divided into Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Just like in the 17th chapter, we dealt with Shraddha, Ahara, Yajna, Tapas, and Dana. The topic that will be taken up, as we are seeing today, is Tyaga, then coming to Karta, Jnana, Buddhi, Dhriti, and Sukha. Towards the end, that means after the 66th verse, Shri Krishna brings about a nice conclusion of the importance of the study of the Bhagavad Gita. The title of this chapter is Moksha Sannyasa Yoga, and we know that moksha is Parama Purushartha. Our objective of the whole study of the Bhagavad Gita is moksha, and that's why the Bhagavad Gita is also called a Moksha Shastra. A student of Vedanta knows one thing is very clear. Moksha is possible only through Jnanam. And Jnanam is possible only once a person has Jnana Yogyata. And that is why these 2 sadhanas of Karma Yoga and Upasana Yoga are being emphasized again and again. Krishna will teach the importance of Karma Yoga. In fact, you will see Karma Yoga is more important than Jnana Yoga. Karma Yoga is also an opportunity because this is such an important sadhana and we have very little time. So can we convert every action that we do into a sadhana by bringing in karma? And what do? Every action should be a jnana. It should be a yajna. Remember, yajna, dana, tapaha, 3 things we cannot give up. But each of them shall be done as a yajna, as an offering, and have no attachment to the outcome, and very importantly, no question of ego. The whole exercise towards jnanam is to work on one's ego. So Krishna is very clear. Becoming a monk is not his idea of becoming a monk and relinquishing all one's responsibilities. He says far greater is one who can become a karma yogi, but then slowly relinquish any form of attachment to the outcome and constantly work on your ego and let there be no sense of I am doing it. There is no sense of doership. Because this chapter began with a question, what is the difference between a tyagi and a sannyasi? Krishna emphasizes a tyagi is one who renounces the fruits of action, emphasizing again, na dveshti. He does not dislike any unpleasant task, works, or responsibility, and has no attachment to the outcome. This kind of renunciation is called a sattvika tyaga. Such a person has a clear outcome of what he really wants in life. And the outcome is, can I make use of every opportunity in my life? That means every activity that I do can be a sadhana so that I can grow spiritually. With that background, we will look into 11th verse. Dr. Ravi Shankar, please.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. The 11th verse of this chapter is Nahi Deha Bharta Shakyam Tyaktyum Karmanya Sheshataha Yastu Karma Phalatyagi Satyagi Iti Avidityate. And it reads in a simple understanding, by one who is identified with the body, it is not at all possible to renounce actions completely, but he who renounces the results of action is said to be a renouncer. Swami Paramarthananda ji has explained this little tricky kind of a verse, and we see as we move on to the next slide. Sannyasa, oftentimes people feel, is giving up all action, and Tyaga is giving up the fruits of action. Now, all action have some fruit of this action, and to give up that is only a possibility, but it is really impossible. And as we have understood now, yajna, dana, tapa must be done, says Sri Krishna, and say the wise people too, because they are spiritually purifying activities and they should not be given up ever. Now, these must be done like an act without attachment or a hope of reward. And this is a nischita mattam uttamam. And what is that? Karmani sangam takta phalamcha. We have understood it just now. Now, when we do a prescribed duty simply because it has to be done, as the Shastras say, and no fruits expected, such a person becomes, such an act becomes a sattvika tyagi. We also heard about this phrase, akushalam. And what does that mean? Sinful, prohibited acts as per the Shastras, and those that are motivated by desire or moha cause bondage. So a sattvik tyagi has to perform duties, actions, no prejudice, no partiality to that at all, and he tends to go towards being a karma yoga, which is the perfect means of securing freedom from bondage of action and attaining that supreme bliss. And this is resolve all doubts, chinna samshaya. So the question comes, why not abstain from all forms of karma? And the Lord, anticipating this question, answers this question in this particular 11th verse. So the verse starts with Deha Bharta, and that is a little understanding we must have. We are not the body with the Atma in, but we are the Atma which has taken up the body. And having said that, those who have their identification with the body or the abhimana of the body, or who are the avivekis, is what is meant by this word Deha Bharta. So when they say one cannot renounce karma, it is these people who have an identification with the body. They will not be able to renounce this karma. And so Swamiji says, in the previous slide, as you can see, karmanyeshatah taktum na shakyam. Total renunciation of karma is impossible. So we can change, we can reduce a type of karma, but you must do the karma. And how do you do the karma? By renouncing the anxiety, by renouncing the fruits of karma. karma phala tyagi bhava should be there. And such a sattvic tyagi is a sahatyagi, is a karma yogi. So sannyasa tyagi is a renunciate, a sattvic tyagi. And this person, as we move on to the next slide, we notice that such a sattvic sannyasa is a karma yogi. And the purpose of being a karma yogi, as understood, is it gives chitta shuddhi. When there is a seed, there is always going to be a tree. And when there is a action, there is always going to be a fruit of action. That happens only when there is a feeling of I-ness or mindness. And the moha that we understood is responsible for karma phala and bondage, which gives rise to birth and death. So a karma yogi with a tyaga of the karma phala, we break this cycle of death, which means we become mrutyunjaya. Shri Guru Bhyo Namah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ravi Shankar, for a very clear explanation of the 11th verse. We are slowly trying to understand about action and the purpose of any action. There is a very nice phrase in the Mundaka Upanishad, Parikshalokan Karmachitan Brahmana. Brahmana means a person who's spiritually wise. He understands one thing, Nirvedyam ayat nastik akrit kritena. Akrita kritena. Akrita means the infinite. The infinite can never be attained by finite efforts. And what do we all want? We want to be limitless. Any form of limitation brings about dukkha. And so therefore, we have to work now for the limitlessness. And that limitlessness is possible through an understanding of our true nature, and that is what we are working through Karma Yoga to become a Medhavi. Now, all of us have this body. We are attached to this body. And as explained by Dr. Ravi Shankar, those who are embodied, for such a person, it is impossible to give up any karma completely. And therefore, we have to make use of our action as a sadhana so that we are able to purify our organs of action, our mind, so that we'll be able to get jnana yogyata. We will listen to more of this by Dr. Divakar. Dr. Divakar, please.
Thank you, sir. Om Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Verse 12. Anishtamistam michrancha trividham karmana palam bhavatyatyaaginam pretya natu sannyasinam kvachet. It is explained very clearly that no one can completely denounce karmas, as karma or the actions are very much needed for survival, for our living. So there is no choice on whether one has to do karmas or not, as karmas is inevitable. However, there is a choice when it comes to the attitude towards the karma. Shri Krishna's emphatic teaching, which he reiterates several times, is convert all the karmas to karma yoga. That is, change the attitude. In other words, instead of becoming serious about the outcomes of the action, which are not fully under our control, change the focus onto the process and do the karmas sincerely. So, karma yoga, which is doing the right actions with Ishvara Arpana Bhava and Prasada Bhava, is doing our duties sincerely and accepting any results gracefully. With this practice, over a time, karmi will evolve into a karma yogi by slowly disidentifying with both the actions, which is called as akarta, and also its results, which is called as abhokta. In the next slide, we see, what if a person refuses to become a karma yogi? What will be the adverse consequence for such a person? People who are engrossed in karma, who are the majority of the population, are materialistic by nature. In other words, they are karmis. Because of their insatiable desires to acquire material results, be it power, property, possessions, or relationships, they will end up knowingly or unknowingly compromising their values. They do papa karmas by compromising dharma. And there are people who does a lot of punya karmas, but with a lot of identification. And there are people who does a mixture of both punya karmas as well as papa karmas. Shri Krishna says, such a karmi will end up facing one of the threefold consequences, which are number one, anishtam, means papa phalam, because one compromises daivi sampat and justifies doing akramas in this Kali Yuga. The second one is the ishtam, which is also called as punya phalam. The third one is mishra phalam, punya and papa mishra. So there are three types of results which are responsible for three types of punarjanmas, which we will see in the next slide. Anishtam or papa karmas will lead to inferior janmas. Punya phalam will give superior janmas and mishra phalam will give manushya janma. For having taken birth as human beings, we all belong to the mishra phalam. All these janmas come under samsara only. Karmas, because of their identification with doerships and receivership, karmi, because of their identification, they will have papa, punya and mishra palam, resulting in punarapi jananam and punarapi maranam. And we have already seen this in the 14th chapter, 18th verse. Urdhvam gachanti sattvastaha madhye tishtanti rajasaha jaganyah gunavrittistaha adho gachanti tamasaha. In the next slide, we see these three types of samsaras, trividha phalam, karmana phalam. These three types of karma phalas are for athyaginam bhavati. Tyagi means karma phala tyagi or karma yogi. Atyagi means karmi. So karmi, after death, referred here as preta, meaning after maranam, will take one of the three births, either sukham, dukkam or mishra. What about the karma yogi? What happens to a karma yogi? Kvachit na bhavati. To a karma yogi who is called as the renouncer or a sannyasi here, punarjalma will not be there. He will neither get higher, lower or middle janma, because karma yogi will get chitta shuddhi and will not identify with any actions or its results, and therefore no more punyam or papam. Karma yoga will result in chitta shuddhi. With Guru Shastram, he gets gnanam and becomes liberated from samsara. Karma yoga doesn't directly lead to moksha, but makes one prepared for jnana yoga, which leads to moksha. Without karma yoga, jnana yogyata will never come. So let's look at the word meaning in the next slide. Arishtam, which is papam, ishtam is punyam, cha vishram, and mixed. Trividam phalam, threefold results, karmanaha, of actions, bhavati atyaginam pretya, it accrues to karmis after death. Tanu kvachid, but never sannyasinam, to the karma yogi. Punya, papa and mishram are three types of rebirths for a karmi, but karma yogi is beyond this cycle of birth and the rebirth. With this, Krishna has answered Arjuna's doubts on sannyasa, which is sannyasa is equal to tyaga, which is equal to karma yoga. This answer is so apt for all of us who are gruhasthas, who are inevitably engaged in all karmas. From the next verse onwards, Shri Krishna explains Jnana Yoga. Hari Om. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Divakar, for an excellent explanation of this verse. This reminds me of the 50th verse in the second chapter, which goes like this. Buddhi yukto jahatiha ube sukrute dushkrute tasmat yogaya yujyasya yogaha karmasu kausalam. The real skill in action is to understand I am not a karta. What happens if you are a karta? The moment you are a karta, you become a bhokta. And the moment you have kartatvam and bhoktatvam, then you have punya, papa, and that cycle goes on. Now, therefore, let us look at the real motivation. Ordinarily, what is our motivation when we are helping others, you will see unconsciously you will have self-interest comes. The misconception is if I serve others, I will get punya. Now, so if we have to put that out aside, then you will see that is only possible by no sense of doership. Because whenever there is a sense of doership, invariably our actions will produce either punya or papa or a mixture of these activities, and the cycle of karma will propagate. That's why they say yogaha karmasu kausalam. That means you have to do karma as if you were a jnani. There is a little transition now from verse 13, and you will see Dr. Ashwini explain this verse. Dr. Ashwini, please.
Thank you, sir. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Verse 13. Panchaitani Mahabaho Karanani Nibodhame Sankhye Kritante Proktani Siddhaye Sarvakarmana. O Arjuna, know from me the following 5 factors required for the accomplishment of all actions. They are mentioned in the Vedanta, which is the culmination of actions, is the summary of it. So now, next slide, sir. The word jnanam in Bhagavad Gita context means Atma Jnanam, the knowledge of oneself. Krishna, describing this, points out that every individual consists of 2 portions, inert achetana amsha, sentient or consciousness part, that is chetana amsha. Swamiji gives an example of burning bulb which has an invisible electricity illuminated through the visible bulb. Here, electricity is invisible amsha and bulb is visible amsha. Both together is called a lamp. Similarly, every individual is like a lamp consisting of the visible body and also the invisible portion, which makes the body alive and sentient. Thus, the invisible principle here is called Atma Amsha. Visible part is called Anatma. So, self-knowledge involves the recognition of these 2 parts as Atma Anatma Vivekaha. Next slide, sir. Thereafter, one has to understand the nature of consciousness, which are consciousness is not a part, nor a property, nor a product of the body. Consciousness is an independent principle which pervades and enlivens the body. Consciousness is not limited by the boundaries of the body. Consciousness continues to survive even after the death of the body. Surviving consciousness is not available for the transaction. This consciousness principle is called Atma. And self-knowledge is understanding that I am a mixture of Atma and Anatma. Next slide, sir. The first stage of spiritual sadhana is recognizing Atma and Anatma as 2 parts. Second stage is to gradually identify more and more with Atma part, disidentifying Anatma, that is the inert material aspect, and also start changing the loyalty from the perishable part to the imperishable part. This is possible only by Shravana, Mananam and Nididhyasana. Next slide, sir. One should forget the mortal principle, which is growing, graying and going, and develop a new habit of claiming the immortality nature. Therefore, I or one should practice I am the consciousness principle, which is not confined to the body, but I am the all-pervading consciousness principle, thus owning up to various features of Atma. The important one being Akarta and Abhokta. This is also talked in 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th chapters as well. Now, Karta being a doer of actions, Bhokta being reaper of results. As samsaris, we are always experiencers of karma phalam. Swamiji says, Karta produces guilt, Bhokta produces anxiety. Our life is a series of guilt and anxiety. All other emotions are the products of these 2. And therefore, If one has to be liberated, he or she should not be either karta or bhokta. Only by negating kartatvam and bhoktatvam, one can be a free person, and only when one gets rid of these two, we own up to our higher nature, that Atma, which is akarta and abhokta, neither a doer nor an enjoyer. To establish that Atma is akarta and abhokta, Krishna points out that all the actions are done by anatma only. Means Atma does not do anything, just like the light illumines the actions of an individual in the hall. Light does not do any job. The consciousness also does not do anything, only Anatma performs. Anatma, which is material part of individual, the inert part of individual, Krishna divides it into 5 portions or 5 aspects, that is Panchatmaka Anatma or Panchatmaka Prakriti. In this verse, Hey Mahabaho Arjuna, may Nibodha, may you learn from me. What? Pancha etani karanani, the 5-folding factors, the factors that are responsible for action, which are going to be enumerated hereafter. Lord Krishna says he has got this information from the Upanishads, and he also acknowledges the source of this knowledge, that is Vedanta. Therefore, ye kritante proktani, proktani is enumerated in krita ante, end portion of karma khanda in Sankhya, which is also Vedanta, that is the final portion of Veda or Upanishads. These are meant for siddhihi. Siddhihi is accomplishment of sarva karmane, all activities. So this verse is the introductory verse for the following verses to be. Hari Om, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ashwini, for a very nice explanation of a difficult verse, because as you look at this verse, you're wondering, are we talking about Karma Yoga or are we in the path of Jnana Yoga? So you will see as we get more and more understanding about how we have to do our actions as if I'm not doing. And then the understanding comes, who is the one who's doing actions? And when we come to me, I'm the one who's doing. Who am I? Now we realize we are a combination. We are a combination of the Atma, and there is a combination of Anatma. Atma is akarta abhokta, very clear. Atma cannot do anything, and therefore it does not reap any punya or papa. The Anatma cannot do anything by itself because it is jada or inert by nature. Therefore, there must be a new entity which is the one who's doing actions. And all these who do this action is the mixture that comes out from the Atma and Anatma. That means for transactional purposes, temporarily a new drama individual is born in all of us. So as Atma, there is no problem. As Anatma, which is inert like matter, there is no problem. It is this combination of Atma and Atma that is where we have all our suffering. Now, that is why all the more we realize all our actions are just a role play. There are certain roles that we have to play. How do we play our roles? We play our roles very sincerely, all the time remembering that I am not the doer. I am somebody else. I have nothing to accomplish. There is nothing to do, but there is a role to play. And can I play this role 100%? And when this sense of no doership is there, then what happens? There is neither punya, no papa, there is no anxiety, no stress. So in the next 2 verses, we will see where is the locus of action. Dr. Ambika, please.
Thank you, sir. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. In this verse, the Bhagavan Shri Krishna explains about the 5 factors required for performing of all the activities. The verse goes like, Adhishthanam tatha karta karanam cha prithak vedham vividhascha prithak cheshtaha Daivam Jaivatra Panchamam. They are the body, the varied function, the various instruments, the doer, and the presiding divinity, which is the fifth among these. Next slide, sir. So what are these 5 factors which are required for performing all the activities? Bhagwan Shri Krishna enumerates the first 4 factors in the form of 4 koshas: the Annamaya kosha, the Pranamaya kosha, Manomaya kosha, and Vijnanamaya kosha. The Annamaya kosha corresponds to the anatomical part of the personality, the Annamaya. The anatomical part, the physical, visible part is called Annamaya. The Pranamaya kosha means the physiological part consisting of bodily function. Manomaya kosha corresponds to the psychological or emotional personality consisting of love, compassion, jealousy, hatred, and anger. The Vijnanamaya kosha, the rational faculty, the thinking faculty, the faculty which tells us what to do and not to do. And all these 4 koshas are required for every action. So what is the 5th one? We will see in the next slide. The 5th one is called the Daivam, known as the Adhisthana Devata. According to the scripture, every organ has got a presiding deity. And all these deities put together is called a Daivam. So the 4 koshas, the Annamaya kosha, the Pranamaya kosha, Manomaya kosha, and Vijnanamaya kosha, plus the presiding principle, the Daivam, is known as the Hiranyagarbha Tattva. Next slide, sir. So what does Adhishthanam means in the shloka? Adhishthanam means the Annamaya kosha, the physical body, the anatomical personality. Pratyak Cheshtaha means the Pranamaya kosha, the physiological functions, which are many and varied. Pratyak and Vividha means many and varied. Physiological functions are known as Pranamaya kosha. Prithak Vidham Karanam means Manomaya kosha, which consists of mind and the sense organ. Prithak Vidham means different types of organ, the eyes, the ears, the nose, the skin, and all of them. So the Manomaya kosha. Karta here means the Vijnanamaya kosha, the thinking faculty, the rational faculty, deciding authority. The intellect alone has to decide what I should do and what I should not do. Daivam cha panchamam. Daivam, the divine principle. All the presiding deities put together, the Daivam. And without the grace of the Daivam, these organs cannot function. So in order to perform any action, the body should have these 5 factors. Hari Om. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ambika. That was a very nice presentation. As you will see, a certain difficulty level comes up because now Krishna is trying to tell us, can we analyze our own actions and see from where the actions arise? As I said in the when I was explaining the last verse, that we are a combination of Atma and Anatma. And now the details of the Anatma, those Pancha Koshas are being explained. The Adhishtanam means the Annamaya kosha, Pranamaya kosha, Manomaya kosha, Vijnanamaya kosha. And the Daivam here refers to the Adhishtana Devata. So these are all, technically all the Anatmas. And the Anatma clubbed with the Atma is the one that brings about any action. More we will see in the next verse. Dr. Manjula, please.
Thank you, sir. Hari Om, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Verse number 18.15. The verse goes like this. Shariravan mano bhiryat karma prarabhate naraha nyayam va viparitam va panchaite tasya hetavaha. The word meaning of the verse goes like this. Ete pancha. These 5 hetavah are the causes tasya of any action. Yat karma, whatever action, naraha prarabhate undertakes, shariravan manobhihi, with the body, the speech or the mind, va nyayam, whether it is righteous, va viparitam or otherwise. Next slide, sir. So these factors, 4 koshas and daivam, are compulsorily required for all human activities. Not just for human activities, for all the living beings. All the activities require these 5 factors, whether they are noble activities, sacred, or whether they are secular activities, or even whether they are evil activities. Every action requires that. In the next slide, we'll understand this in detail. Next slide. So these 5 factors are compulsory required for all the human activities. So the activities, whether they are righteous or whether they are illegal, are done at 3 levels: kaika, vachika, or manasika. The karmas that we talk about, the uttama karmas or adhama karmas, are also done at these 3 levels. Our daily activities, transactions, and whatever the activity that we do, including pancha mahayagnas for our spiritual sadhanas, or the other activities according to our rule, whatever we do are done at these 3 levels. And all these activities require the 4 koshas and the daivam. And here, for examples, like whatever we do in terms of the japa, parayanam, physical activities, upasana, all these activities, even the illegal activities or the activities which are directed towards harming others, also involves the 5 factors mentioned in the previous verses. Here, Sri Krishna mentions activities done by Naraha. So in the scriptures, scripture do not consider the activities done by animals as karmas, because the activities done by animals are not planned or done deliberately or with intention. So they don't acquire any papa or punya. However, all the activities done by human beings yields papa or punya. So Krishna mentions that mentions about the activities done by human beings. In the next slide, we see Puja Swami Paramarthanandaji further explains the significance of these 5 factors which are mentioned in the previous verse as anatma principle. Here, consciousness is highlighted as one of the factors, as consciousness is neither karta or bhokta, and therefore Swamiji emphasizes that one must learn to claim oneself as akarta, abhokta atma, instead of identifying with the body. Here, an example is given, like we use instruments for our day-to-day activities, but we don't identify ourselves with the instruments. Hence, we need to use this body, maintain the body for our transactions, but one should not identify with the body. So Krishna explains us to learn to claim ourselves as like claim us as other than the body as a atma principle. So in the subsequent verses, we'll understand this body-mind complex in the subsequent verses. Thank you. Harim.
Thank you, Dr. Manjula, for a nice explanation of a difficult verse. One of the very fundamental steps in Vedanta is body identification. I am someone other than the body. Naham deham. This is a famous verse from Bhagavan Ramana. Naham deham. I am not my body. And if the Vedanta and great masters declare I'm not the body, the next question is koham. Inquire and find out, then who am I? And when you inquire through Guru Shastra, and you discover your true nature. Now, our true nature is Atma, and Atma does not do anything. But we also have the body-mind. The more I understand that my body-mind is only an instrument, but I'm not the instrument. And the more I see it as a temporary instrument for action, I use my body to do whatever roles I have, and I do it with the understanding that I have no particular attachment to action. Just like when you are playing with small children, you spend time, you get involved, but there is no intention to win or lose. So in that sense, if I can do whatever my role is 100% without any focus or anxiety about the outcome, without no sense of doership, and that is what is Buddhi yukto jahatiha. There is a nice integration of jnanam and karma, and in such a way, there is no punya or papa. This sort of discussion will continue into the next class, but we will listen to the chanting of these verses by Smita Pai. Smita, please.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Nahi dehabhritam shakyam tyaktum karmanya sheshataha yastu karma palatyagi satyagitya vidiyate anishtamishtamam mishram cha trividam karmanah palam bhavatyatyagi pretya natu sanyasinam kvachit panchaitani mahabaho karanani nabodhe me sankhye kritante proktani siddhaye sarva karmanam adishtanam tata karta karanam cha pratakvidam vividascha pratak cheshta daivam chaivatra panchamam Shariravaং manobhiryat karma prarabhate naraha nyayam va viparitam va panchaite tasya hetavaha. Hari Om.
Thank you, Smita, for your flawless, melodious chanting. Thank you all speakers for a wonderful class. Thank you, friends, for your active participation and feedback. On Monday, 6 February 2023, let us log in for a new session 46 of Disha for the discovery of inner strength and happiness at 6:45 p.m. In this episode of Disha, we will continue our study of 10th chapter along with Tattva Bodha. With this, let us conclude today's session with our usual Shanti mantra. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.